This report has been a long time coming. I did a lot of research on this for my book, Eating Tomorrow, which I have presented on at AFSA briefings, but this is an update of that research, brings it up to the most current data available in 2018, and it really shows that the Green Revolution is failing. What I want to do is present just the main findings from this report, give you a little background on AGRA and on the report, just to mainly make sure that AFSA members know what kind of resource this can be for your work. The report is called False Promises, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, funded and produced by the Rosa-Luxemburg Foundation in Germany and South Africa. A number of the organizations, including some on this call, participated in this, Biba in Kenya, and then a coalition of German-based NGOs, Bread for the World, FIAN Forum on Environment and Development, INKOTA, and then IRPAD in Malawi, PELUM in Zambia, Tabio and TOAM in Tanzania. And the report commissioned 4 case studies on Kenya, Mali, Zambia, and Tanzania. So here's some very quick background that you probably already know. So AGRA was founded in 2006 by the Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundations, with Kofi Annan heading the launch and being the head of the board. Since 2006, it has received about $1 billion in funding. 2/3 of that has come from the Gates Foundation itself. Others come from governments, mostly donor governments like my own. We just got a new estimate that the US government has put in about $90 million over that 14-year period. And out of that $1 billion, AGRA has made $524 million in grants, or had through 2018. And the chart at the right shows the amount given to each country to support the adoption of commercial seeds and fertilizers and the market structures that would allow them to be disseminated widely in African countries. As you can see from that list, this is a list of the 13 main countries that AGRA has worked in. Most recently, Niger and Tanzania, Niger and Zambia were taken out of AGRA, but Zambia is now reapplying. You can see the amount of support ranges widely, the highest being Tanzania at $77 million over a 12-year period. The goals, and this is what we are trying to ask AGRA and the Gates Foundation to hold themselves to, their announced goals were to double productivity, double incomes, and cut food security in half for 30 million smallholder families in their target countries. That is the vast majority of smallholder households in those countries. What this report also looks at, though, is not just AGRA and its impacts, because in fact, it's very hard to see many impacts from AGRA by itself. It has been part of a much larger campaign for Green Revolution practices. And African government support in that is far more important. African governments, 10 of these 13 countries, have input subsidy programs that subsidize for small-scale farmers the purchase of seeds and fertilizers. And together, those add up to, depending on the year, roughly $1 billion a year in subsidies for the purchase of Green Revolution inputs. So I see those programs as far more of a driver of the Green Revolution in Africa than AGRA itself, though Million is entirely right to say that AGRA is driving the agricultural narrative on the continent. To give you an idea, Malawi has the largest FISP or has had the largest input subsidy program. about $55 million a year now. It has been much higher, spending up to 60% of the government's agricultural budget on input subsidies. AGRA provides just $2 or $3 million a year in Malawi, compared to 55 million in input subsidies. So this report assesses the progress on AGRA's goals, and here are the main findings. We found no evidence of a 100% increase in productivity. That would be a doubling. Even maize, which is heavily favored by input subsidy programs and by AGRA, saw only 29% yield increases over 12 years. That's not a strong record of yield growth. And overall, yields for a basket of staple crops grew only 18%. The subsidies have expanded the amount of land planted to favored crops, but not the yields. So as you all may have seen in your own countries, when the government gives money to plant maize, people plant more maize on more land. That has had a negative impact on other crops. We've seen no evidence of incomes doubling. Poverty is still very high across the region. And for welfare effects, for the improvements in farmers' welfare, we looked mainly at national levels of food security, the number of undernourished people according to UN data. And it's striking that there's been a 31% increase in the number of undernourished people in AGRA countries over these 12 years. Only 4 AGRA countries showed a decline in the number of undernourished, and in 9 it increased. So the conclusion of the report is that the Green Revolution model is failing and that agroecology offers more to African governments and particularly to small-scale farmers. It would be lower costs to governments instead of paying for these expensive inputs, and lower costs for farmers with higher net returns on their increased productivity. Diverse and nutritious crops and diets that will produce greater food security, and soil restoration and other environmental benefits. We cite a study that surveyed a wide range of ecological agriculture projects across 50 different poor countries, and that found an average 79% increase in productivity with declining costs for farmers, increasing incomes, and improved nutritional diversity. That is what AGRA is fighting for, and that's what has been well documented to work. So now let me just go through quickly and give you a sense of some of the specifics and also some of the ways we're trying to develop visualizations of these findings so that they can be most useful. So I'll be very interested in people's input on how we can best present this in a way that would be effective. The first set of bars on the left here is AGRA's goals over here, 100% increase and a 50% decrease in food insecurity. And you can see they've gotten only 18% yield growth and not a decrease, but an increase in the number of undernourished. And this is an important finding of the report, is that first bar is maize, the favored crop. And if you can see that they've almost doubled total production of maize across the region, across AGRA countries, but only a small share of that has come from yield growth. The goal was to double productivity, not production. And all those subsidies have drawn all this production from expanding the amount of area planted to maize. That has come, we found, and the data show this.
De davantage de plantation, donc davantage de terrain planté avec les.
And like sorghum, millet saw a 24% decline in production, a 21% decline in yields, and declining amount of land planted to millet because of all the subsidies pushing land into maize. Similar with sorghum, our staple yield index mixes those, combines those into a basket of of staple crops, so that we can measure yields not just for a favored crop like maize, but for a basket of crops. Again, that was only an 18% increase over 12 years, very low. And finally, and this is perhaps the most shocking, is the undernourishment level. The goal way down here was to cut food insecurity in half, and instead it's gone up by 30%. The report documents that decline of important traditional and nutritious crops, and that's very important. There's been a general stagnation in millet. In cassava, there's been a 6% decline in yields in this period. Roots and tubers as a whole, a 7% decline. Sorghum, just 3% yield growth. And groundnuts, a 23% decline in yields. So this is not a productivity revolution. This is a productivity devolution, moving backwards on key staple food crops. We are starting to produce some of these same graphic representations of what's happened in different countries. I'll just show you two to give you an idea, because these are two of the case studies in the report. In Zambia, Zambia is a really striking case, because they have massively increased maize production, more than by 150%. But the goal, again, was to double productivity, not production. And their yield growth has been very small, 27%. They've, just like in AGRA as a whole, lost ground in millet and sorghum and other nutritious crops. The staple yields have, the basket of crops has been very low in terms of growth. And despite all that extra maize, think about that, you have 150% more maize. That's nearly tripling the amount of maize being grown in the country, and undernourishment has gone up by about 25%. Zambia is striking because 78% of the rural population is considered to live in extreme poverty, and that has not changed in this period. It has not improved at all. Kenya was striking in this study because it has actually seen negative yield growth, meaning yields have gone down for maize despite an input subsidy program and other government support. That's the darker blue is the declining yield growth. Some yield declines in sorghum as well. A staple yield for that basket of crops is negative, and undernourishment has gone up more than 40% in Kenya in that same 12-year period. So again, this is a useful, again, I show you that because I think this data tells a story, and a story that African governments should listen to from their farmers and advocates. These are the figures overall for the two measures that AGRA most cares about, which is productivity and undernourishment or food security. Again, you can see, you can find your country on that list. Only Ethiopia shows anything like what AGRA was shooting for, which was strong productivity growth and declines in the number of hungry. But even those don't come close to meeting AGRA's goals, which would be 100% increase in yields and a 50% decline in the number of hungry. Ghana, Mali, and Malawi showed some yield growth and declining hunger, a good sign, but 4 countries like Kenya showed falling yields and rising hunger. Nigeria and Uganda were particularly striking for the dramatic rise in the number of undernourished. And 5 countries like Zambia show that kind of pattern of very slow yield growth, and even though they're producing more maize, rising hunger. This is another way to visualize that same data. And again, remember that that blue line up here is the goal of doubling productivity. The red line would be up here, or is supposed to be up here for cutting food security in half. And again, you can see that a country like Mali has actually done well on one of the best on reducing the number of undernourished and reducing poverty as well. And they've had a respectable gain in yields, but dramatically increased production. But I draw attention to Rwanda in particular, because Rwanda is one of AGRA's success stories. They claim that Agriculture Minister Agnes Kalibata left Rwanda to become the head of AGRA, and she has now been named to head the special envoy for the World Food Summit next year in New York. We see a terrible track record for Rwanda. They got 66% maize yield growth, and that's what they claim as a success. That would be up here. But for staple yields, it's not as good, because they've dramatically weakened the production of roots and tubers and sorghum, two staples in the Rwandan
Donc,
diet.
sorghum, par exemple.
All of their subsidies and support and some authoritarian measures to enforce them for growing maize. So it's instructive, and their poster child, they're the star of the class. Rwanda has actually shown an increase in the number of hungry. So it's really not a success story. Let me just conclude the pretty straightforward conclusions and recommendations from the study.
1 minute.
Okay. Donor governments and foundations should withdraw funding from AGRA. We asked AGRA to provide data for this study, and they refused. The Gates Foundation has offered no data showing that its programs are effective. They really need to do that, or withdraw from AGRA. African governments, and I think this is much more relevant to the people in this briefing, should withdraw from AGRA. Zambia is now reconsidering joining, and I know that there's a campaign to try to get Zambia not to rejoin. And that the spending on input subsidy programs and other Green Revolution programs needs to be redirected to agroecology and other low input systems that are favored by farmers and are much more supportive of small scale farmers and food security. And finally, all governments and donors need to respect the right to food and peasants' rights and other international obligations, because these are not meeting that standard. And finally, it's not an explicit recommendation, but it is a consensus among those who participated in the study. We should really remove the head of AGRA, Agnes Kalibata, as the special envoy for the 2021 UN World Food Summit, because she is presenting a very narrow vision of what agriculture can and should be. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Tim. Very eye-opening. I think in addition to their failure to decrease poverty and improve nutrition, and their direct contribution to the erosion of our seeds and poisoning of our land, probably one not easily observable impact is what they call past dependency. Most of our countries, both under AGRA and out of AGRA, have gone into in a direction where they are forcing or encouraging their farmers to use agrochemicals and limited number of high-valued seeds. So they have taken a pause, and it's very difficult to come back out of that pause. That's what it's called, past dependency. There's one hand up there. Thank you very much again, Peter. Tim. Peter?
Yeah, Tim, thank you for a very well-researched paper. I read it all this morning, and you've emphasized several points. I just have two questions for you. one concerns Ethiopia because several times during the paper and in your presentation, you've mentioned that Ethiopia's data seems not to be in the same pattern as the other 11 countries or 10 countries. And that's, and I know that Ethiopia has a very strong social protection program, which could affect how, you know, the levels of poverty and undernourishment are being done. I'm just wondering if you have any comments about, is Ethiopia doing well in spite of AGRA, or are there other conditions that maybe before AGRA it was already doing well in terms of agricultural productivity and reduction of malnourishment compared to after AGRA started intervening? Was there any positive contribution of AGRA that you could see to explain why the data from Ethiopia seems different? That's the one question. And the second question is, I'm just sort of a bit puzzled. You know, like you're comparing all the countries on national data, whereas in Ghana you had 77 million or 74 million, I think, investment. Right next door, where I also work in Burkina, it was 3.5 million or something close to that. There's huge difference, you know, and I don't know how, I mean, all the data is correct, obviously, but to say that this is an assessment of AGRA, even though they have their overall goal, it doesn't, it sort of masks a bit that, well, in one country we put in 3 million, in the other country we put in 77 million. I'm just wondering how you would, you know, let's use the word justify. I'm playing a bit devil's advocate here, you know, to use national data to assess their and hold them accountable, because it shouldn't be accountable on the basis of amount of investment made. If you can, but I know you didn't get access to that research, but anyway, those are the questions I have.
Jan, should I just, I know we don't have much time and we have other speakers. Why don't I give very, very quick answers to that? And one of them actually passes it off to one of our case study researchers. We did not, Ethiopia was not included as a focus of as a case study itself. And so I don't want to go, and that's not my area of expertise. So it's something that we obviously need to research more. But I think you named the main reasons that they might have done better. Mali is actually an interesting case that Mamadou can talk about, because they have not accepted so many of the AGRA dictates, the Green Revolution dictates. And the answer to the second question is, we really weren't evaluating just AGRA. It's almost impossible to find much of any direct impact of AGRA alone on productivity improvements and reductions in food insecurity and poverty. But it's a package. It's part of a package of Green Revolution programs that can't be isolated from each other, except if AGRA gave us a detailed impact assessment of their own interventions, which they refused to do. So I like to think of this study as much more an indictment of the Green Revolution model as a whole than of AGRA's impact in particular.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. I think we should go to the other speakers. The way we do it is I will ask them some questions to which they would reply. The first one would be Mukotoi Wamuniima. He's a country director of PELUM Zambia. He's based in Lusaka, Zambia. He's a sociologist and a development worker with 10 years experience in civil society work, over 15 years experience in the public sector. Mukotoi, what are the key findings from Zambia? I know we have heard something from Tim.
Yeah.
But you know, as a person who have commissioned this research in Zambia, what are the main findings from Zambia?
Yeah, thank you, Million, and hello, everyone. Thank you, Tim, for that overview on the research. And just to add on to your presentation, to say that as a country, yes, we have enough maize to feed our country, but at the expense of the other crops, which we basically have to import any other crop to just to fill the demand of the nation on the different other foods that we need. And so coming to the key findings of the research, and as far as Zambia is concerned, the focus of the research in Zambia was on the Farmer Input Support Program, which has been the main strategy of government in terms of the agriculture sector. And we find from the research that our government has basically focused its strategy and resources on the Farmer Input Support Program, which has been a huge cost to the revenue of the government. It has also denied us the opportunity to diversify the sector as a country, and at the expense also of the farmers whose incomes have drastically gone down because the revenue they get from maize is not enough to sustain them and improve their livelihoods. So FISIP is basically something that is huge in Zambia, and it has costed us the extension services. It has costed us the diversification agenda that we have as a country, which has greatly impacted on the, our development goal and putting the agriculture sector as one of the key economic drivers of the country. So basically, in terms of the findings, I think those are the main highlights of the research. And as I've mentioned earlier, the strategy of the agriculture sector has actually been an AGRA-driven kind of strategy for our country as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mukute. Do you have any story to illustrate your findings? Somebody, personal story somewhere.
Yes, I think to illustrate the impact that we have, I think I'll take it to a region in Zambia, the southern half of the country. This used to be the food basket of the country in terms of production of food. We had huge hectares of land that was cultivated for a long time. But because of the fertilizer and chemical use in this region, the soils have been badly depleted. And this has greatly affected the production in this region. And it is one of the now most poverty-stricken area with very low production of crop. There's always, in the past 10 years, this government has had to, send relief food just to alleviate hunger in this region. And this has been all because of the practice or the type of agricultural practice that's been happening in this country. So it's an example that crosses a region and affecting hundreds of thousands of people.
Thank you very much. One last question shortly. You are serving as a director or executive director of PELUM Regional now. Yeah. And most of the AGRA countries are also where the PELUM networks are working. So what are you going to do with the results of this research?
Yeah, so this research, I must say, is a very strong tool for us as an association and as a regional network. The results of this research will greatly help our advocacy work in terms of pushing for sustainable agriculture, especially agroecology, which we are promoting as an association. In doing that, we've already shared this report with our country offices in the 12 countries that we operate in. Specifically in Zambia, we've also done quite a lot already in terms of sharing the report with our partners and our members in the country. Just this morning, we had a workshop with the media. We had about 25 media houses, and we shared this report with them, and we're hoping we could spread it more. And lastly, in terms of the policy, we are looking at how we can influence policy in country and also try to see how we can influence policy at COMESA level and SADC level, as well as the Eastern Bloc. So those are the strategies that we hope we can use as PELUM Association using this report.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much for using your 5 minutes really, really well. Thanks a lot. Our next speaker is Ann Maina. We know Ann. She played a really, really great role in the beginning of the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. She's a seasoned advocacy expert who has been active in advocacy and lobbying against food solutions advanced in Africa, like GMOs, and push for green revolution in Africa. She's currently the director of Biba. Biba is Biodiversity and Biosafety Association of Kenya, formerly Kenyan Biodiversity Coalition. Biba is a member of AFSA. She was the lead researcher in Africa. As a citizen of a country receiving one of the biggest share of the funding from AGRA, what does your finding imply to you, generally?
Okay, thank you very much.
What's the impact of the funding on your food system?
Okay, thank you very much also for organizing this Zoom webinar. I think we did the research for Kenya, and it's quite shocking that the claims that have been made by AGRA on double yields, double income for farmers has not happened. In Kenya, Kenya has received quite a huge amount, about $7.3 million US, but a lot of it has gone into input subsidies program supporting agro dealers. And so there's been a lot of focus on giving or providing synthetic fertilizers. Farmers have not had the right of choice in terms of seed. There's the example of the Kilimo Biashara program in Kenya, where we did in the Meru Maua area in Kenya. Kilimo Biashara is a Swahili word that means agriculture for business. And so a lot of the programs, especially under the PASS program, were focused on alerting the farmers that you can do agriculture as a business. And in this case, farmers in the Kilimo Biashara program, which involved one of the biggest banks in Kenya, which is seen as a common man's bank, everybody's bank, Equity Bank, went into a program together with IFAD, World Bank, and the Ministry of Agriculture, and were providing loans. The interesting thing about this is that the loans are not coming in terms of cash. So the farmers would be given a loan, and then you're given a voucher, you go to an agro dealer, you get the seed. You have no right of choice to the seed. The next time the agro dealer provides with you the fertilizers, the pesticides, and other inputs. At the end of the day, we were seeing a situation where farmers faced a lot of challenges because a lot of it was focused on maize. Later, there was expansion to other crops, but you can see the impact it had in terms of food and nutritional security. Farmers did not have a choice in terms of the seed to use. A lot of the seed was actually hybrids, affecting even the farmer managed seed systems where farmers could exchange seeds. But farmers now were locked into a situation where they would get everything from these companies. And remember, the loan is payable in cash. Some of the farmers went through very hard times. And so from our side, we saw this was something that was not working, especially for the Kenyan farmers, where they were locked into sort of a situation where they were locked into debts and could not have a right to choice. We see this as having an impact, especially on the food system, because when farmers eventually realized that there was not much profit coming from this maize business. Maybe to take you a bit back also, in the productive areas of the country, the government had sort of an input subsidy program where they would give inputs in the rainy season, and farmers would go for it. So a lot of fertilizers used, having an impact on the soil fertility, eventually going down. So every year, every season, the use of more fertilizers, productivity went down. Farmers, some were abandoning even production of maize. So what would happen during harvest time? The farmers are in so much debt and are locked into a season where they have to pay fees, they have to deal with the loans they're dealing with. They sell their maize products cheap, and eventually some abandoned even the crop. And Kenya is actually now almost like a net food importer in the region. And when the COVID-19 situation started, and it had a bad impact because when trucks were no longer coming in from Tanzania, Uganda, where we import a lot of our food, there was an increase in the price of food in the country.
Thank you very much, Anna. Final question. I will ask you the same question that I've asked Mutokwe. You are a network, Biba, and you also work with other networks in Kenya. How are you going to use this research, the data from this research, or the information from this research?
We're going to use it in our advocacy work. When we launched the report, we shared it with a lot of our media, and Kenya being the host country for AGRA, we'll continue with our advocacy work in terms of pushing for AGRA to be more transparent. Over the years, they have gotten over 1 billion, and this amount, and they keep on changing about what they are going to achieve in those, and it's now over a decade since it started, and bringing in aspects. We also have a campaign on the issue of toxic inputs, for the removal of those toxic inputs from the Kenyan market, which is affecting issues of soil fertility. And so that will be key going forward in terms of our advocacy work, having this evidence of where we have such a big project which has not brought much change. In fact, it has made us go back in terms of our productivity, even in Kenya and the rest of Africa.
Excellent, excellent, Anna. I wish you
Thank you.
good luck in your struggling. We are all with you, as you know. The last speaker is my brother Mamadou Goita. He's a director of IRPAD. He's a well-known activist in West Africa, as you know. He played a huge role in the start of AFSA, and he's also a member. And he's also a member of IPS Food. So I will ask you the same question. What are the main findings from Mali?
So I will be quick since we don't have much time. We did this research in Mali, which is a particular case. You've seen all the different cases or case studies. Like Tim said, there was an evolution of production during the period previously or previous to the program. There are many factors that I want to highlight. I will give you an idea of AGRA's impact. Mali is we're saying that the total budget invested is $36 million from 2007 to 2020. And this gives you a good idea. This amount corresponds to 1% to Mali's budget destined to agriculture. And Mali is supposed to dedicate 15% of their budget to agriculture. And the agro investment is insignificant. The interpreter. So the $36 million invested favored access to chemical input. And this is the main program, 53% of this amount. The market takes 35% and 11% is the support to the country. These amounts were destined to policy changes, and AGRA could not interfere with the Mali policies. In 2006, when AGRA started, Mali used national policies or national agriculture policies. And it started in 2004. So we already had in 2006 a policy framework. The interpreter can't hear. The interpreter hears and can't hear. The communication is not very good. So this concept started and was operationalized. When you see the statistics presented, there was an evolution of production, but this evolution is linked to the investment of Mali in agriculture, and is also linked to the measures taken in public policies. And this led to this evolution. Secondly, in the political process.
En 2007, il y a beaucoup qui sont avec nous dans cet appel-là. Mariam Mayet, Nimo Bassé.
Mariam Mayet, Bassé, and other friends. Copagen invited 34 countries in November 2007. It was the beginning of AGRA, and there was the greatest meeting organized to protest against AGRA in Africa. So we already organized in November 2007 with 34 countries, and some that are probably already online with us. Anne was there as well, to create a movement that we called agroecologic alternatives against AGRA. And Mali resisted against AGRA's program. Investments were made, and we continued this protest by organizing different types of meetings in Mali with actors to denounce this project.
So I would like to thank you, Mamadou, Anne, Gauthier, and Tim for coming and explaining the main results of your research. It's quite shocking, you know. It's 12 years, and they had a very long time to prove themselves that whatever system that they are proposing works. As I said, and as you all know, the influence of the narrative is even much more dangerous for me. They are still gearing up to play a bigger role in Africa. So they are trying to lock our agricultural system into industrial agricultural system, and they are using a lot of methodologies. And also there are areas that we haven't been researched and spoken about. Their influence in spreading and promoting genetically modified organisms in Africa. We didn't even talk about that. I know for a fact that they have started Agricultural Transformation Agency in Ethiopia. So ATA, maybe the funding that is coming from the Agricultural Transformation Authority in Ethiopia and AGRA, you know, they might appear separately, but they work closer. Most of the staff of AGRA do come and work at ATA, I know that. And ATA actively works to promote genetically modified organisms in Africa. So AGRA is actively playing that role too. So there are a lot of stories out of this. And as we all know, SCB, Mariam is here, is doing a lot of research on AGRA. They have been doing a lot of research on AGRA. I think we need to keep on doing this research. We have to explore other areas or other avenues of AGRA so that we have a complete picture of this mammoth and very dangerous organization in Africa. And I thank you all. I thank Michael for handling the logistics, and I thank you all for participation. Have a great day.